Welcome to Let's Talk Grinnell, the podcast that digs into the past, present, and people who helped shape the small city of Grinnell, Iowa. I'm Walter Gatlin. Today we're taking you back to an automobile plant, a brick complex on the edge of town that once hummed with blacksmiths, carriage makers, and for a short, brilliant run, automobile makers. This is the story of the Spaulding plant, an industrial corner of the Midwest where the age of the horse met the age of the horseless carriage. Our story begins in 1876 when a young Vermont native named Henry W. Spaulding arrived in Grinnell and set up shop as a blacksmith. He soon moved from repairs into manufacturing. First wagons and carriages, then spring wagons designed for the hard roads of the Great Plains. Over the next decades, the business grew into a multi-building complex, brick buildings rising 2 and 3 stories, a tall masonry chimney marking the skyline. At its height, Spaulding Manufacturing was said to be the largest vehicle producer west of the Mississippi. Now think about that for a second. In a town of a few thousand people, an operation rose that turned out buggies and wagons for farms and towns across the region. The plant wasn't tiny. When carriage production was in full swing, the factory employed hundreds of local men who turned wood, shaped iron, sewed leather, and assembled running gear. The workshop was part factory, part craft shop, a workshop in which old world hand skills met mechanized production. But the turn of the 20th century brought pressure to change. Across the country, the automobile was emerging from experiments and tinkering into a full industry. Spaulding's story at this crossroad is interesting because it's both typical and uniquely Grinnell. Rather than abandon vehicle making, Henry Spaulding and his sons adapted. By about 1910, Spaulding Manufacturing had added automobiles to its product line. Brass-era cars built right here in Grinnell. What did a Spaulding car look like? Picture a 2-door touring car from the 1910s with polished brass fittings, a Rudenberg 4-cylinder motor in the nose, and comfortable coachwork that reflected the firm's carriage heritage. Leather seats, wooden spoke wheels, and a sense of civic pride. Models evolved quickly. Early Spauldings were modest. Then the company offered larger, more powerful cars. At one time advertising a 30 horsepower model and later a 40 horsepower version. They even tried innovations like electric lights and starters as those features became available. Spaulding cars were marketed in a way that makes sense. Through the company's established carriage agents across the Midwest, dealers who already trusted and sold Spaulding buggies. It was a practical strategy. Leverage an existing distribution network, but there were limits. Grinnell was not Detroit. Supply chains and access to the very latest parts were more difficult in a small town. Transportation of specialized parts, the challenges of scaling production, and the new economics of automobile pricing all worked against smaller makers. Just like a new product today, it starts off great, and then the giant takes over. What are you going to do? And then there was Ford, the Model T introduced in 1908, that rode a wave of mass production and low price that reshaped the marketplace. By the mid-1910s, car buyers could choose a dependable, affordable Ford rather than paying significantly more for a hand-built regional Marquis. Spaulding produced automobiles in Grinnell from roughly 1910 through 1916. But by then, competition, parts, logistics, and financing pressure had taken its toll. In short, Spaulding could build beautiful cars, but it could not match the price or distribution muscle of the emerging national firms. And automobile production in Grinnell ended in 1916. Those years of automobile making, short as they were, left a physical legacy. The Spaulding Manufacturing Complex consists of 5 main brick buildings constructed between 1880 and 1910. They're sturdy red brick reminders of an era when towns built things that lasted. The complex was recognized for its historic value when it was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1978. After Spaulding's automobile production stopped, the company didn't vanish overnight. It shifted to truck bodies and road machinery, and the factory served a variety of small manufacturers through the early 20th century until business wound down in 1929. Over the decades, the buildings found many uses, from light manufacturing to veterinary clinics, and at times parts of the complex fell into despair. Still, the buildings and the stories stayed with the community. Now flash forward to recent memory, the Spaulding plant was reborn in new ways. Part of the complex became home to the Iowa Transportation Museum, a local effort to preserve and display transportation history that included a crown jewel, a rare restored 1913 Spaulding automobile. For a while, you could visit and stand where those cars were built, see carriages, parts, and imagine factory floor alive again. But small museums face big financial challenges, and the Iowa Transportation Museum closed amid financial difficulties. The fate of that restored Spaulding car and other assets became a local concern and news stories in the 2010s. Still, Grinnell found a new way to give the complex life: renovation. The larger factory buildings were converted into apartments. Call them the Spaulding lofts, while other parts of the complex were adapted for municipal use. The city's administration offices moved into renovated space, and local historic displays, including Spaulding artifacts and chassis, are available through the Grinnell Historical Museum and affiliated exhibits. It's a model of adaptive reuse. Keep the bones, change the function, and carry the story forward into everyday life. What then is the Spaulding plant's significance? On one level, it's local heritage, a company that provided jobs, identity, and civic pride in a small Iowa town. On another level, it's an emblem of industrial transition, from carriage to automobile, and of the way economic forces concentrate industries in some places while scattering them in others. Spaulding is part of a larger American story. Many regional builders tried to make the leap into automobiles, and many had to stop when national mass production took over. The work, nevertheless, mattered for their communities, for their workers, and for the technologies they helped develop. A lot of those technologies are because of the small towns. I want to pause and bring in a human detail in old photos, postcards, newspaper clippings, and the occasional preserved photograph. You could see Spaulding workers, men in aprons, families beside new buggies, and proud owners leaning on a Spaulding car. The firm's distribution through carriage agents meant the brand connected farmsteads and main streets across the Midwest. That human thread, the jobs, the apprenticeships, the families that depended on the plant, is as important as any engine spec. If you want to explore the Spaulding story in person, portions of the historic complex are publicly accessible as part of Grinnell's civic buildings and museum displays. The Grinnell Historical Museum lists Spaulding buggies and a Spaulding car chassis among its exhibits, artifacts that help tie the town's industrial past to its present. And the Spaulding lofts stand as a visible marker of how historical industrial architect can be renewed for contemporary use. Now, before I wrap it up, here are a few neat details you can drop into a conversation. Spaulding automobiles were built roughly from 1910 to 1916 and featured engines from suppliers like Rudenberg and later Buda. They ranged from 30 to 40 horsepower models and at times included innovations like electric lighting and starting. The Spaulding complex includes 5 primary brick buildings dating from roughly 1880 to 1910, a footprint of industrial growth that's been recognized on the National Register. Now, the company's move away from automobiles wasn't a failure of engineering so much as the market realities of distribution, parts logistics, and capital, the same headwinds faced by many regional automakers of the era. All of which leaves us with a tidy but honest truth. Spaulding was a product of place, a family business grown into a regional manufacturer, and its rise and fall traced the arc of the American industrial change in the early 20th century. Now that's our look at the Spaulding car plant, Grinnell, Iowa. If you're curious to dig deeper, the National Register nomination form and local museum collectors are great places to start. I'll include links in this episode and notes so you can explore photos, floor plans, and newspaper accounts from the era. And if you're from Grinnell and you've got memories, photos, or family stories about Spaulding, send them our way. These are the threads that keep local history alive. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow the podcast and join us the next time as we explore more hidden stories from Grinnell and the surrounding areas. Until then, stay curious, appreciate the scenes around you, and keep celebrating the treasures in the towns and cities we call home. I'm Walter Gatlin with Let's Talk Grinnell. I will see you next time.